Elderly man in a wheelchair pushed off building by millionaire. Watch what the police horse did. The heart of Manhattan buzzed with activity that sunny morning. Imported luxury cars crossed the avenues, and the mirrored skyscrapers reflected the magnificence of the million-dollar businesses that shaped the landscape. In one of these buildings, an elderly man in a wheelchair observed the street from the balcony, breathing deeply, as if trying to find courage for the imminent battle. Walter Thompson, a 72-year-old retired architect, had spent the past 3 weeks leading a group of residents against the demolition of their homes, a plan devised by a ruthless tycoon named Blake Harrison. The billionaire, owner of Harrison Developments, saw the Riverside Towers building as merely an obstacle to his plans to erect a luxury complex. The offers to buy the apartments had transformed into veiled threats when Walter refused the last proposal. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. Let's keep going. I won't let him erase 60 years of history, Walter muttered to himself, adjusting the blanket over his legs. The morning sunlight cast long shadows across his weathered face, highlighting the determination in his eyes. Several floors below, Emma Thompson, Walter's daughter, parked her car hastily. A successful attorney known for taking on challenging cases, Emma had received an urgent call from her father. Blake Harrison had scheduled a meeting in Walter's apartment, supposedly to make one last reasonable offer. Emma knew better than to trust the developer's intentions. As she rushed into the building's Art Deco lobby, Emma nodded at Samuel Williams, the doorman who had watched her grow up in these halls. "Your father's expecting quite the entourage." "This morning, Miss Thompson," Samuel said, lowering his voice. "Mr. Harrison arrived with 3 security guards. I tried to tell him only one visitor was allowed upstairs, but he insisted." Emma's pace quickened. "Call Officer Richard Parker right away. Tell him we might need assistance." Across the avenue from Riverside Towers, Officer Parker was completing his morning patrol on his police horse, Thunder. The chestnut stallion had been with the NYPD mounted unit for 7 years and was known for his calm demeanor in the busiest parts of the city. Today, however, Thunder seemed unusually agitated, pawing at the ground and tossing his head. "What's wrong, boy?" Officer Parker patted Thunder's neck, trying to calm him. The horse neighed loudly, ears pricked toward the residential building across the street. Parker had learned to trust Thunder's instincts during their years together. Something wasn't right. His radio crackled. "Officer Parker, this is dispatch. We have a call from Riverside Towers requesting your presence. Possible disturbance." Inside Walter's penthouse apartment, the tension was palpable. Blake Harrison, a man whose tailored suits cost more than most people's monthly salary, stood by the window, looking out at the city as if he already owned every inch of it. "Be reasonable, Walter," Blake said, his voice smooth but with an undercurrent of irritation. "Riverside Towers is outdated, structurally compromised. My offer is generous. More than generous. Each resident will receive market value plus a 30% premium." Walter's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. "This building passed its structural inspection just last year. Your claims are fabricated, and we both know it." Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Inspections can be reinterpreted. I have city officials who understand progress requires certain sacrifices." "You mean officials you've bought," Emma said, entering the room. Her presence seemed to momentarily disrupt Harrison's confidence. "Ms. Thompson, always a pleasure," Harrison recovered quickly. "I was just explaining to your father the inevitability of this development. Surely, as an attorney, you understand the concept of eminent domain." "Eminent domain requires public benefit, Mr. Harrison. Your luxury condos hardly qualify." Emma moved to stand beside her father's wheelchair. "And threatening elderly residents crosses several legal boundaries. I'd be happy to explain in court." Harrison's facade of civility began to crack. He gestured to his security team to step closer. "I didn't want to do this the hard way, but you're forcing my hand. I have deadlines to meet, investors expecting returns." Walter wheeled himself toward the balcony, needing fresh air as the confrontation intensified. "You can't bully us out of our homes, Harrison. We've filed complaints with the Housing Authority and the District Attorney's Office. Complaints that will mysteriously disappear," Harrison replied, following Walter onto the balcony. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The security guards blocked Emma as she tried to follow. Through the glass doors, she could see the two men engaged in a heated argument. Walter's face had turned red with anger, and Harrison was leaning threateningly over the wheelchair. Outside the building, Thunder's agitation had increased dramatically. The horse reared up suddenly, nearly unseating Officer Parker. "Whoa, Thunder!" Parker fought to control the animal while trying to understand what had upset him. Thunder's gaze remained fixed on the upper floors of Riverside Towers. Following the horse's line of sight, Parker noticed movement on one of the penthouse balconies, two figures in what appeared to be a confrontation. Inside, the argument had escalated. Emma finally pushed past the security guards just in time to see Harrison grabbing her father's wheelchair. "Stop it!" she shouted, rushing forward. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Walter's wheelchair tilted precariously near the balcony railing as Harrison released it abruptly. Emma lunged forward, grabbing her father just as the wheelchair slipped backward. The momentum sent Walter tumbling from his chair, but Emma's grip prevented him from hitting the concrete balcony floor too hard. Harrison stepped back, his face pale. "He lost control of his chair," he said quickly. "I tried to help." From across the street, Officer Parker watched in horror as commotion erupted on the balcony. Thunder neighed loudly, drawing the attention of passers-by who began to gather, pointing upward. Minutes later, emergency responders rushed into the building. Walter Thompson was taken to Manhattan General Hospital with serious injuries, a broken hip, fractured ribs, and a concussion. As the ambulance pulled away, Harrison emerged from the building, phone pressed to his ear, discussing damage control with his public relations team. "A tragic accident," he told the small crowd that had gathered. "I'll personally ensure Mr. Thompson receives the best medical care available." Officer Parker, still struggling to calm Thunder, watched Harrison suspiciously. The developer's demeanor seemed too calculated, too composed for someone who had just witnessed a serious accident. As Harrison climbed into his waiting town car, Thunder neighed again, stomping his hoof against the pavement. "I know, boy," Parker murmured. "Something doesn't add up." Across town, in the editorial office of the New York Chronicle, journalist Maya Rodriguez was finishing her morning coffee when the police scanner caught her attention. A disturbance at Riverside Towers, the very building her latest investigation centered on. For weeks, she had been following the paper trail of Harrison developments, uncovering a pattern of suspicious accidents and convenient building code violations wherever Blake Harrison set his sights. Maya grabbed her messenger bag and headed for the door. "Tell Simmons I'm following up on the Harrison story," she called to her editor. As she hailed a taxi, Maya had no idea that she was about to step into a battle for justice that would connect the lives of a determined lawyer, a principled police officer, a wounded elderly man, and one remarkably perceptive police horse. That afternoon, as Walter lay unconscious in his hospital bed, Emma Thompson stood at the window, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter in the distance. Behind her, the steady beep of monitoring equipment was the only sound in the room. "I'll find out what really happened, Dad," she whispered. "I promise." The fluorescent lights of Manhattan General Hospital cast a harsh glow over Emma Thompson as she paced the corridor outside her father's room. It had been 3 days since the incident, and while Walter's condition had stabilized, his physicians remained concerned about potential complications. The official report labeled what happened as an unfortunate accident, but Emma knew better. "Ms. Thompson," A voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma turned to see Officer Richard Parker approaching, his police cap held respectfully in his hands. "I hope your father is improving." "Slowly," Emma replied, studying the officer's face. She had noticed him at the scene that day, the mounted policeman whose horse had seemed so agitated. "You were there, weren't you? Outside Riverside Towers?" Parker nodded. "My partner Thunder and I were on patrol. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me, or with Thunder for that matter." Emma leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "Thunder's been with the mounted unit for 7 years. He's usually unflappable, but that morning he was practically frantic, focused on your father's balcony before anything even happened." Parker hesitated. "I know how this sounds, but that horse sensed something was wrong." Under normal circumstances, Emma might have dismissed such talk, but nothing about the past few days had been normal. "Officer Parker, the security cameras in our building mysteriously malfunctioned that morning. All of them, simultaneously." Parker's expression hardened. "That's not a coincidence. I tried to access the footage as part of my report, but was told the system had experienced a technical glitch. Harrison's people were all over the scene before I could secure it properly. My father has been fighting Blake Harrison's development plans for weeks," Emma explained, lowering her voice as a nurse passed by. "Harrison wants to demolish Riverside Towers for some luxury monstrosity. Dad organized the residents, filed complaints, even got a historical preservation petition started. And now he's in the hospital," Parker finished grimly. "I'd like to open an investigation, but my superior instructed me to file it as an accident and move on. Harrison has friends in high places." Emma wasn't surprised. Blake Harrison's influence extended throughout New York's power structures, from the City Planning Commission to the mayor's office. "So what do we do?" Before Parker could answer, a young woman approached them, her press badge partially concealed inside her jacket. "Ms. Thompson, Maya Rodriguez from the New York Chronicle. I was hoping I might have a word with you about what happened at Riverside Towers." Emma tensed, automatically protective of her father's privacy. "This isn't a good time for press interviews." "I understand," Maya said, glancing meaningfully at Officer Parker. "But I'm not looking for just another accident story. I've been investigating Harrison developments for months. Your father's case might be the key to exposing what Blake Harrison has been doing across the city." Parker studied the journalist with newfound interest. "What exactly have you found?" Maya pulled out her phone, swiping through a series of photographs. Pattern of strategic accidents, mysterious building code violations, appearing right after owners refused to sell, sudden health and safety concerns for buildings that had passed inspection just months earlier. The same claims Harrison made about our building, Emma realized. "Exactly," Maya nodded. "I believe Harrison doesn't just bend rules, he breaks them, and possibly people who stand in his way." Parker frowned. "Those are serious accusations. Do you have evidence?" "Circumstantial mostly, but I received an anonymous tip about a food delivery person who might have captured part of the incident on their helmet camera." Maya looked at Emma hopefully. "They apparently make regular deliveries to Riverside Towers." Emma's eyes widened. "That would be Jake Miller. He delivers lunch to Dad almost every Tuesday and Friday. The residents love him. He even has the doorman's access code because he comes so frequently." "We need to find him," Parker said decisively. Back at Riverside Towers, chaos had erupted among the residents. Harrison developments had accelerated, their evacuation timeline citing urgent structural concerns following Walter's accident. City inspectors, wearing Harrison Development visitor badges, moved through the building with clipboards marking violations and posting notices. Samuel Williams, the doorman, watched helplessly as elderly residents struggled to understand what was happening. When he recognized Jake Miller arriving with his delivery bag, Samuel pulled him aside. "Jake, thank goodness. Have you heard from Miss Thompson? These people are trying to clear the building, saying it's unsafe." Mrs. Abernathy. On the 4th floor is in tears. She has nowhere to go. Jake frowned, adjusting his helmet. I was actually hoping to find Emma. I think I caught something on my camera the day Mr. Thompson got hurt. I noticed it when I was reviewing footage for my delivery blog. Samuel's eyes widened. That could be important. Harrison's security team has been swarming the place, claiming they're helping with the investigation. Nay, more like controlling it, Jake muttered. I tried to access the full video last night, but my memory card was corrupted. Only fragments remained. That doesn't sound like an accident, Samuel said gravely. It's not, Jake agreed. 2 men approached me outside my apartment yesterday, said they represented the building's insurance company and needed my footage as part of their investigation. When I refused, they suggested I should be careful riding in city traffic. Samuel looked around nervously. You need to find Emma, or that police officer, Parker, I think his name was, the one with the horse. Across town, Officer Parker had returned to the mounted police stables to check on Thunder. The horse had remained unsettled since the incident, which was highly unusual for the normally steady animal. What did you see that day, boy? Parker murmured, stroking Thunder's neck. The horse nickered softly, pushing his nose against Parker's shoulder. As Parker prepared to leave, he noticed something odd in Thunder's stall. A piece of torn fabric caught on a nail. He recognized it immediately. The distinctive pattern matched the cuff of Blake Harrison's expensive suit. Parker had noticed it during their brief interaction after Walter's fall. How did this get here? Parker wondered aloud. Then he remembered Harrison had briefly approached Thunder while waiting for his car, ostensibly admiring the animal. At the time, Parker had thought nothing of it, but now he wondered if Harrison had been trying to establish an alibi by appearing calm around animals. Parker carefully placed the fabric in an evidence bag. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Emma had returned to Riverside Towers to collect some of her father's belongings, only to find residents in various states of panic and confusion. They're saying we have to leave by the end of the week, Mrs. Abernathy told, her voice trembling. Where am I supposed to go, Emma? I've lived here for 42 years. You're not going anywhere, Emma assured her. They can't evict you without proper notice and relocation assistance. But the notices say the building is structurally unsound, Mr. Petrovich from the 3rd floor interjected, waving an official-looking document. They're saying it's for our safety. Emma took the paper, quickly scanning its contents. This inspection report is dated yesterday, but references damage that supposedly occurred months ago. It's fabricated, Mr. Petrovich. A commotion at the entrance caught their attention. Jake Miller burst through the doors, out of breath and looking panicked. Emma, thank goodness you're here, he gasped. 2 men have been following me since I left my apartment. I think they work for Harrison. Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. Maya Rodriguez calling with news. I found something, the journalist said without preamble. Harrison Developments filed for demolition permits for Riverside Towers 3 months ago, long before any safety concerns were raised. Publicly, they already had architectural plans for the new development dated from last year. That proves he planned this all along, Emma replied, her mind racing. He created the safety issues as an excuse. There's more, Maya continued. The cleaning lady who was working on your father's floor that morning, Maria Gonzalez, has disappeared. Her family says she came home terrified after the incident, packed a bag, and left to stay with relatives upstate. She told her sister she saw something she shouldn't have. The pieces were starting to fit together, but Emma knew they needed more concrete evidence. Harrison had covered his tracks too well, and without proof, it would be his word against Walter's, a battle they were likely to lose given Harrison's connections. We need to find Maria Gonzalez, Emma decided, and we need to recover Jake's footage before Harrison's people get to it first. What none of them realized was that across town, Harrison was meeting with his inner circle, planning their next move. The accident had drawn unwanted attention, and the developer was determined to accelerate his timeline. As surveillance photos of Emma, Parker, Maya, and Jake were spread across his desk, Harrison's expression darkened. "These people are becoming a problem," he said coldly. "It's time we showed them what happens to those who interfere with progress in this city." Back at the hospital, Walter Thompson's eyes fluttered open for the first time since the incident. Disoriented and in pain, he struggled to make sense of his surroundings. But one memory remained clear in his mind: the moment before he fell and the words Blake Harrison had whispered to him on the balcony. "This is just the beginning, old man. By the time I'm finished, no one will remember Riverside Towers ever existed." The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty halls of Riverside Towers. In just 1 week, Harrison Developments had managed to evacuate nearly half the building, a combination of intimidation and generous cash offers proving effective against frightened residents. Emma Thompson sat in her father's apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the remnants of a lifetime. Walter remained in the hospital, his condition improving but still serious. Emma's cell phone buzzed. Maya Rodriguez's name lit up the screen. "I found Maria Gonzalez," Maya said without preamble. "She's staying with her cousin in Albany. I've convinced her to meet us, but she's terrified, says Harrison's men threatened her family." "When can we go?" Emma asked, already reaching for her car keys. "Today, Officer Parker has agreed to drive, as he's officially taking a personal day, but he'll be in uniform. I think it will help Maria feel safer." Emma glanced at the wall calendar. 3 days until the scheduled demolition inspection that would likely greenlight Harrison's plans. If they couldn't find concrete evidence by then, Riverside Towers would be condemned. "I'll meet you downstairs in 20 minutes, she decided. As Emma locked the apartment door, she noticed a maintenance worker she didn't recognize examining the hallway ceiling. He avoided eye contact, speaking quietly into a radio clipped to his collar. Harrison was having the building watched, which meant whatever Maria knew must be significant. In the lobby, Samuel Williams pulled Emma aside. "Miss Thompson, be careful. 2 men claiming to be from the gas company tried to access the building's blueprints yesterday. When I asked for identification, they left immediately." "They're looking for something," Emma realized. "Something that might stop the demolition." Samuel nodded. "Your father once mentioned that the original architectural plans contained some special designation. Something about the foundation or the historical registry." Emma's heart raced. Her father had been an architect before retirement. If anyone would know the building's secrets, it would be Walter. She needed to speak with him, and soon. Outside, Officer Parker waited in an unmarked police car, Thunder safely stabled back at the precinct. Maya sat in the passenger seat, laptop open to a digital map, marking their route to Albany. "Any progress with Jake's video footage?" Emma asked as they pulled away from the curb. Parker shook his head. "The memory card was professionally corrupted. I sent it to a forensic tech friend at the department, but he's not optimistic." "We have another problem," Maya added, turning to face Emma. "Harrison filed an expedited demolition request this morning, citing imminent danger to public safety. If approved, they could start demolition as early as next week." Emma's jaw tightened. "He's getting desperate. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes." The 3-hour drive to Albany passed in tense silence, each lost in thought about what might lie ahead. Maria Gonzalez had agreed to meet them at her cousin's apartment, a modest unit in a complex on the city's outskirts. When they arrived, Maria nearly didn't open the door. Only the sight of Parker's uniform seemed to reassure her. Inside, the small living room was sparse but immaculately kept. Maria perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I should never have come to work that day," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Thompson was always kind to me, always remembered my birthday with a card and a tip." But what I saw, she trailed off, eyes darting to the window. "You're safe here, Maria," Parker assured her. "Whatever you tell us stays between us until we can ensure your protection." Maria nodded slowly. "I was cleaning the hallway outside Mr. Thompson's apartment. When Mr. Harrison and his men arrived, they didn't see me. I ducked into the utility closet when I heard them coming. The things Mr. Harrison was saying—" She shuddered. "He told his men to make sure the old man understood the consequences of refusing the final offer. One of them mentioned something about the balcony." Emma felt a chill run through her. "Did you see what happened on the balcony?" "No, I was still hiding. But after the commotion, when the paramedics came, I slipped out to continue my rounds. That's when one of Harrison's security men saw me. He asked what I'd heard, and I lied, said I had just arrived. He didn't believe me." Maria's voice broke. "That night, a car followed me home. 2 men came to my door, said if I talked about anything I saw or heard, my family would suffer." "Would you be willing to make an official statement?" Parker asked gently. Maria hesitated. "They will know it was me. My family." "We can arrange protection," Parker promised, though Emma noticed his uncertainty. With Harrison's connections, official protection might not be enough. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's phone. The hospital was calling. Walter had regained consciousness and was asking for her. They needed to return to Manhattan immediately. "I'll come forward when you can guarantee my family's safety," Maria decided as they prepared to leave. "But until then, I was never here." The drive back to the city was faster, Parker pushing the speed limit as darkness fell. Outside Manhattan General Hospital, a news van from a local station was parked near the entrance. Harrison making a show of visiting the man he'd nearly killed, no doubt spinning the narrative of his concern. Emma slipped in through a side entrance, taking the service elevator to her father's floor. Walter Thompson was propped up against pillows, gaunt but alert, his eyes brightening as his daughter entered. "Emma," he said, voice weak but determined. "I remember what happened." Emma grasped her father's hand, mindful of the IV lines. "Dad, don't push yourself. You need to rest." Walter shook his head stubbornly. "No time for that. Harrison is going to destroy everything we've worked for, but he doesn't know about the designation." "Samuel mentioned something about special plans or a registry," Emma recalled. "What designation, Dad?" Walter gestured weakly toward his personal effects bag. "My keyring. The brass key opens the storage unit in the basement of my old firm, Holloway and Thompson Architects, Box 47B. The original plans are there, with the historical foundation certification. The building can't be demolished. It sits on a historical foundation dating back to 1880. I never filed the paperwork because I was waiting for the right moment." Emma's heart leapt. This could be the evidence they needed to stop Harrison legally. "I'll go right away." "Be careful," Walter warned, suddenly agitated. "Harrison has people everywhere. He told me on the balcony that nothing would stand in his way. Not me, not history, not the law." As Emma left the hospital, she noticed a black SUV with tinted windows idling near the parking garage entrance. She took a circuitous route, doubling back several times until she was certain she wasn't being followed, then headed for her father's former architectural firm in Midtown. Holloway and Thompson now operated under new ownership, but the archives remained intact in the basement. Using Walter's brass key, Emma accessed the climate-controlled storage room and located Box 47B. Inside, she found the original architectural renderings for Riverside Towers, along with a file labeled Historical Certification Documentation. The papers confirmed Walter's claim. Riverside Towers had been built atop the foundation of one of Manhattan's first public libraries, a structure of historical significance that legally could not be demolished under city preservation laws. Walter had prepared all the documentation, but had strategically withheld filing it, saving it as a last resort against developers like Harrison. Emma carefully photographed each document, then replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. As she turned to leave, the storage room door swung open. A security guard stood in the doorway, radio in hand. "Miss, this area is restricted after hours," he said, eyeing her suspiciously. Emma held up her father's key. "I'm Walter Thompson's daughter. He's a founding partner. I have permission to access his archived materials." The guard studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Just sign the logbook on your way out." Heart pounding, Emma retraced her steps to the lobby, sensing that her window of opportunity was closing fast. Outside, she quickly sent the photographs to Officer Parker, Meyer, and her own email as backup. As she hailed a taxi, her phone rang. Meyer, her voice urgent. "Harrison's men broke into my apartment. My laptop's gone, along with all my research files on Riverside Towers. They're tying up loose ends, Emma." "I have the documents," Emma told her. "Meet me at the precinct. It's time to make this official." Across town, at the mounted police stables, Officer Parker was concluding his evening check on Thunder when his phone chimed with Emma's message. As he scrolled through the photographs of the historical documentation, a noise at the stable entrance caught his attention. Two men in dark clothing stood silhouetted against the evening sky. Neither wore police or stable staff uniforms. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Parker called, hand moving instinctively toward his service weapon. "Just admiring the horses, officer," one of the men replied smoothly. "Magnificent animals, especially that one." He pointed toward Thunder, who pawed nervously at the ground. "The stables are closed to the public after 6, Parker informed them, stepping protectively in front of Thunder's stall. "I'll have to ask you to leave." The men exchanged glances. "Of course, officer. Sorry to intrude." As they turned to go, Parker noticed a familiar insignia on one man's jacket cuff, the same stylized H that adorned Harrison Development's business cards. Once they were gone, Parker quickly led Thunder out through the rear stable exit. Harrison's reach extended further than any of them had imagined. No place was safe. Not Emma's home, not Maya's apartment, not even the police stables. As Thunder's hooves clattered against the pavement, Parker made a decision. It was time to take the evidence they had gathered directly to the district attorney's office. With the historical documentation, Maria Gonzalez's testimony, and the fragment of Harrison's suit found in Thunder's stall, they finally had enough to launch an official investigation. What Parker didn't know was that Harrison had already made his countermove. As emergency vehicles converged on Riverside Towers, residents watched in horror as a gas leak forced an immediate evacuation of the remaining occupants. By morning, demolition equipment would be in place, ready to reduce the historic building to rubble before any preservation order could be filed. The race against time had begun, and the fate of Riverside Towers and justice for Walter Thompson hung in the balance. Dawn broke over Manhattan with a golden haze, the early light illuminating the demolition equipment now surrounding Riverside Towers. Yellow tape cordoned off the sidewalks as Harrison Development's crews prepared for what they called an emergency structural removal, scheduled to begin at noon. Residents huddled across the street, some in tears, others in angry disbelief as they watched. Their home of decades prepared for destruction. Emma Thompson stood at the edge of the gathering, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke urgently with Judge Eleanor Simmons, an old friend of her father's from law school. "The emergency injunction needs to be signed immediately," Emma insisted. "Harrison is circumventing proper procedures by claiming a gas leak emergency." "I understand, Emma," the judge replied, "but I need more than just photographs of old documents. The city inspector has already signed off on the demolition order, citing public safety concerns." "The inspector is on Harrison's payroll." Emma's frustration mounted. "We have witnessed testimony that Harrison intentionally caused my father's injuries to accelerate this process. Hearsay won't stop a wrecking ball," Judge Simmons said gently. I need something concrete. A witness willing to go on record, physical evidence, anything that directly ties Harrison to wrongdoing. Emma ended the call, momentarily defeated. Across the street, she spotted Blake Harrison himself, immaculate, in another expensive suit, speaking with the demolition foreman. His expression was triumphant as he gestured toward the building. Maya Rodriguez pushed through the crowd to reach Emma, camera in hand. "I've been documenting everything," the journalist said. "The gas leak inspection lasted all of 15 minutes before they evacuated everyone. No actual gas company personnel were present." "It won't matter unless we can get that injunction," Emma replied. "Judge Simmons needs more than circumstantial evidence." "Then we'd better move fast," Maya said, pointing toward the north end of the block. "Look who just arrived." Officer Parker was making his way toward them, leading Thunder by the reins, rather than riding him. Behind them walked Maria Gonzalez, flanked by two uniformed officers Emma didn't recognize. "Maria agreed to make an official statement," Parker explained when they reached Emma. "And my forensic tech friend managed to recover fragments of Jake's video, enough to show Harrison aggressively confronting your father on the balcony." Hope surged through Emma. "That might be enough for Judge Simmons to grant the injunction." "There's more," Parker continued. "I called in some favors at the department. We've been quietly collecting evidence on Harrison for months, suspicious business dealings, building code violations that appear and disappear, officials who suddenly change their positions after private meetings. Why didn't you say anything before?" Maya demanded. "Internal investigation protocols," Parker explained. "We couldn't risk Harrison finding out and destroying evidence, but with Maria's testimony and the historical documentation, we finally have enough to move." Across the street, Harrison noticed their gathering and frowned, speaking quickly into his phone. Within minutes, two of his security personnel began moving toward them. "We need to get Maria somewhere safe," Emma said urgently. "Already arranged," Parker assured her. "She's giving her statement at the precinct right now. That's Detective Williams and Rodriguez with her, not patrol officers. What you're seeing is a decoy to draw Harrison's attention." Emma stared at him. "You set a trap." Parker nodded. "Harrison's been one step ahead this whole time because he has informants everywhere. We needed him to think he still had the upper hand. While the real Maria gives her statement downtown," Maya realized, impressed. "Exactly. And I've sent the partially recovered video footage directly to Judge Simmons, along with affidavits from 3 former Harrison Developments employees who were willing to testify about falsified safety reports." Emma's phone buzzed with an incoming email. The emergency injunction had been granted. They had until 5 p.m. to present their full case before the judge, but in the meantime, no demolition could proceed. Emma hurried across the street, injunction in hand, pushing through Harrison's security to reach the developer himself. "This is a court order, halting all demolition activities," she announced, loud enough for the gathered residents and press to hear. "Riverside Towers is protected under historical preservation statutes, and there will be a full investigation into the events of the past 2 weeks." Harrison's face darkened with fury. "This is a temporary setback, nothing more. I have the mayor's office on my side, the planning commission, the building department, all of whom will be very interested to distance themselves from you once they see what we've uncovered." Emma interrupted. "It's over, Harrison." For a moment, it seemed, the developer might physically lash out. Instead, he straightened his tie and regarded Emma coldly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Ms. Thompson. By this time tomorrow, your injunction will be overturned and this building will be rubble." As Harrison turned to leave, Thunder suddenly moved forward, blocking his path. The horse's unexpected movement caused Harrison to stumble backward, dropping his phone. When he bent to retrieve it, something fell from his pocket, a small voice recorder. Officer Parker quickly picked it up before Harrison could react. What's this, Mr. Harrison? Recording conversations without consent is illegal in New York State. Harrison reached for the device. That's private property, officer. Parker held it away from him. I believe this may be evidence in an ongoing investigation. As the standoff continued, Jake Miller pushed through the crowd, his delivery uniform disheveled, his face flushed with excitement. "Emma, I got it!" he called out, waving a small USB drive. My backup cloud storage had a copy of the video. The whole thing, not just fragments. Harrison lunged for Jake, but Thunder moved again, this time positioning himself between the developer and the delivery man. The crowd of residents, emboldened by the presence of police and the news crew, surged forward protectively. "Seems your horse has good instincts, Officer Parker," Maya observed, camera trained on Harrison's increasingly desperate expression. "Thunder always knows when something's not right," Parker agreed. By mid-afternoon, the tide had turned completely. Judge Simmons not only upheld the injunction, but issued a temporary restraining order preventing Harrison or any of his employees from coming within 100 yards of Riverside Towers or its residents. The recovered video clearly showed Harrison deliberately destabilizing Walter's wheelchair while his security team blocked Emma from intervening. Maria Gonzalez's testimony confirmed the threats made against her, and the voice recorder found in Harrison's pocket contained incriminating conversations with city officials regarding bribes and falsified safety reports. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, the residents of Riverside Towers gathered in the lobby to celebrate their victory. Walter Thompson, released from the hospital under his doctor's protest, sat in his wheelchair surrounded by neighbors and friends. "This isn't just about saving our homes," Walter told the assembled crowd. "It's about standing up to people who think their money puts them above the law." Emma, standing beside her father, noticed Officer Parker slipping quietly out the front door. She followed him outside, where Thunder waited patiently at the curb. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. Parker smiled. "Just giving you all some space to celebrate. Besides, Thunder needs his evening exercise." Emma approached the horse, gently stroking his muzzle. "I never thought I'd owe so much to a police horse." "Thunder's special," Parker said, pride evident in his voice. "Best partner I've ever had." "What happens now?" Emma asked, looking back at the building that had nearly been lost. "Harrison's been taken in for questioning. With the evidence we have, plus what the DA's office has been gathering, he's facing serious charges: attempted assault, bribery, intimidation of witnesses, falsifying official documents." Parker shook his head. "His empire's crumbling as we speak. The mayor's office is already distancing itself, claiming they had no knowledge of his methods." Maya joined them, notepad in hand. "And I'm making sure the whole story gets told, every corrupt detail exposed. No one will do business with Harrison after this." 3 months later, Riverside Towers had been officially added to the city's historical registry, protecting it from future development attempts. Blake Harrison faced multiple indictments, his company's assets frozen pending investigation. Several city officials had resigned in disgrace as their connections to Harrison's schemes came to light. Walter Thompson, fully recovered from his injuries, established a foundation to help other communities fighting against unscrupulous developers. The Riverside Preservation Fund provided legal resources and support to those who might otherwise be powerless against corporate interests. Emma returned to her law practice with a new focus on tenant rights and historical preservation cases. Her experience with Harrison had shown her just how vulnerable ordinary citizens could be when faced with powerful adversaries who believed themselves above the law. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emma met Officer Parker in Central Park for what had become their weekly ritual, visiting Thunder and bringing him his favorite treats, carrots and apples. "The DA called this morning," Parker mentioned as they watched Thunder enjoying his snack. "Harrison's trying to cut a deal, offering to testify against other developers involved in similar schemes." Will they accept? Emma asked. Parker shrugged. Depends on what he's offering. Either way, he won't be bulldozing anyone's home for a very long time. As they walked through the park, Thunder trotting contentedly beside them, Emma reflected on how their unlikely alliance had changed so many lives. A determined lawyer, a principled police officer, a courageous journalist, a loyal doorman, a brave housekeeper, and one remarkably perceptive police horse. Together, they had stood against corruption and won. You know, Emma said, watching. Thunder's ears perk up at a distant sound. I always thought justice was something that happened in courtrooms, with judges and juries and legal arguments. And now? Parker asked. Emma smiled, reaching out to pat Thunder's neck. Now I know it happens wherever people refuse to look the other way, even if one of those people happens to have 4 legs and a tail. Thunder nickered softly as if in agreement, while across the city, Riverside Towers stood tall against the Manhattan skyline, a monument to the power of ordinary people standing together against extraordinary odds. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Emma Thompson and Riverside Towers has moved you. For more emotional journeys like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the triumph of justice. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments below.